A lot of our time online is almost like an out-of-body experience, right? It's like you get onto a game, you get into your social media app, and then you look up and a half an hour has passed. And where have you even been? You certainly haven't been in your body. You don't even know what position you're in. You haven't taken a breath in 10 minutes. So to be able to get back into your body so that your body can send you the signals that you need of you need a break, or that's disturbing you, or this is making you anxious, listening to your body is a great resource.
Welcome to Freedom Matters, where we explore the intersection of technology, productivity, and digital well-being. I'm your host, Georgie Powell, and each week I'll be talking to experts in productivity and digital wellness. I'll be asking them 3 questions to get to the heart of what productivity means to them. This week, I'm in conversation with Julia Storm, an LA-based digital media wellness specialist. She's an educator, writer, public speaker, and the founder of ReConnect. Today, we'll be discussing what screen time means in a pandemic, how both screen time and children can differ, and the importance of intuition. Julia, thank you so much for joining us today on Freedom Matters. It's absolutely fantastic to have you on the show.
It's wonderful to be here. I'm looking forward to it.
We kick things off with a reflection on the pandemic. As screen time has, in many cases, unavoidably increased, parents have become anxious about how to preserve boundaries in their household. But, Julia reflected, the important thing really to focus on is, are our families thriving?
The pandemic has made it so that many parents have found their screen time rules upended. And this could obviously cause a lot of anxiety, particularly for parents who were, quite strict before, or if not strict, at least had some very clear limitations. And once the pandemic happened and there was a lack of ability to go out into the world and for children to entertain themselves with other kids or outside the house, obviously there was an uptick in the amount of time that kids are spending in front of screens and necessarily having to connect with one another through screens. And so many parents found themselves in a situation where they had to say yes to things that they previously had said no to, whether that was new games, social media, or even for younger kids texting, because they saw that these were the only ways that kids were going to be able to connect with one another. So then the question becomes, well, if counting minutes isn't going to work anymore, what do we do? And my theory is that what we really need to look at is the overall well-being of your child. Is your child thriving? So, for example, for me, that meant simple things like, are they getting enough sleep? Are they eating healthy meals still? Do they move their bodies and exercise on a regular basis? Are they able to laugh and have some joy? Are they connecting with me? Am I connecting with them? Are they being contributing members of the household? All of these things I take into account. If your family is religious, maybe, are they having their spiritual practice continue? All the things that are in line with your values and are in line with what indicates a healthy child. If all of these things are intact and all of these things are happening for your child, then maybe you don't need to worry quite as much about the exact number of minutes or hours that your child is spending in front of a device. And instead, we can reframe it and say, okay, yes, my kid seems okay. My kid seems healthy and balanced. And I can focus more on what are they doing on those devices when they're on them, right? Instead of just the amount of time. Because not all screen time is equal and not all screen time has a detrimental effect on a child.
We've heard similar views before, and so I was interested to understand further. When Julia said not all screen time was created equal, what did that mean to her?
First of all, of course, as humans, we're not meant to be sedentary, and we're not meant to be seated in front of a device for most of the hours of the day, and particularly for children who are growing, Their bodies need to move just for their health. So there is that
Mm-hmm.
aspect of it that we do need to take into account. However, in terms of the content that they are consuming or creating on a device, it just doesn't all have the same effect on their brains. So when we think of screen time that has a negative effect on our children's brains, what we're really thinking about is the screen time that is generating a really high dopamine response. So, highly stimulating, instant gratification, the kind of screen time that maybe we see with certain video games, with social media, with the constant scroll that never ends, with online shopping. These are all activities that elicit this pleasure response pretty intensely in all of us and definitely in children. And what we want to do is to not allow children to binge on those, right? So,
Yeah.
on the media that creates this kind of what we quote unquote might call an addictive response, which is basically just it's releasing a high level of dopamine. We don't want to stay in those for too long because what happens is that you build up a tolerance. And so you have a certain
Mm.
threshold of what feels good, what brings you joy. And anything that doesn't meet that threshold now becomes boring or can't hold
Mm.
your attention anymore. And this is why a lot of parents say, my kid will be on their video game for a few hours, and then it's like they're lethargic, they don't feel like doing anything, everything else is boring. And that's a direct response to this dopamine level now dropping, and their brain is getting used to wanting a certain level of stimulation. So,
Mm.
one of the solutions to that is to just not allow these long binges, right? So, you want to cap off, let's say, your child's screen time when they're doing one of these activities, probably at an hour. If you have a younger child, say younger than, I don't know, 7 maybe, you want to cap it off at a half an hour. But in general, you really need to give your brain and your body a break in a sort of cyclical
Mm-hmm.
way. So, time on, time off, time on, time off. And this can allow your brain to keep a balance in your dopamine levels, and it gives your body a chance to move and to recalibrate. On the other hand, something like Zoom school, or even, let's say, editing a movie, or creating a song on GarageBand, or even doing an exercise video, those activities are not highly stimulating in the same way. It's not an instant gratification. And so,
Mm-hmm.
even though you're on a device, it's not having the same effect. It is still having the same effect on your body of being sedentary, but it's not necessarily having that same effect of that high dopamine release. And that's something for parents to take into account because it's really not quite the same thing. That doesn't mean that, okay, still allow your kid to spend, 5 hours without a break editing their movie, but understand that there's a very different process going on. It's not just consumption, it's creation. It's not, giving them this high release of dopamine. So they need the breaks because their bodies need to move, but they don't need the break for the same reason as, say, 5 hours of Fortnite.
Playing devil's advocate, I asked her, if kids weren't to take breaks, if they conditioned themselves to binge and were gaming for 5 hours a day, why would that be bad? Julia talked about the cost of displaced activities and the long-term impact on important human skills like relationship building.
Well, there's two reasons. Number one is that 5 hours to be devoting to that is at least 3 or 4 hours that you're not doing something else. And there are a lot of other things for children to be doing in this world that feed them, that nourish their soul and their mind and their bodies and help them to become a well-rounded and well-adjusted individual. So that's a
Mm-hmm.
lot of hours where they're not getting that from something else. And then the other side of it is what I was saying earlier, which is that they're going to start to feel a lack of interest in other
Mm.
things and in everyday pleasures. And when one can't sit with the everyday, it makes it harder to enjoy relationships, and it makes it harder to
Mm.
enjoy everyday activities. And that can become very
Mm.
isolating.
But does this affect all children in the same ways? What should parents look for when determining what screen time boundaries work best for them?
Yeah, so everybody has a different brain. And if you have more than one child, you know this well, that your children are very different. They have different temperaments. They react to things differently. And the same goes for how they interact and react to technology. And some children will have a much harder time breaking away than others.
Hmm.
Some kids, yes, they love their devices, but they can walk away from it and get just as much pleasure from something else, and they don't feel this intense pull. And other children really are more susceptible to the pull. There is some research and some evidence that children who have dopamine deficiencies or dopamine related disorders, maybe an ADHD or children on the spectrum, perhaps,
Hmm.
do tend to have a harder time disengaging. So they are more susceptible because their brains are seeking dopamine. And here it is, and it's a really easy way to get that sense of fulfillment and to feel a sense of focus, a sense of calm. And so it's a lot harder for them to disengage from it. And if you have a child like that, that's something to look at and something to teach them about, and teach them about their particular brain, and what to look for and what are the signs that they're getting hooked on something and that they need to recalibrate and balance.
I certainly see that in my children, how very different they are and how very different already their interaction with technology is. So, looking forward, children's games obviously getting faster, more engaging, more appealing all the time. The technology that we use as adults is increasingly persuasive and immersive. How do you think this is going to play out in terms of parents navigating this relationship alongside their children? How should they position themselves? And what is the world that we're looking at going into sort of 2021 and beyond?
Well, the train has left the station, so we're not going backwards. I don't know what the future of technology holds. There is quite a movement around humane technology and trying to make technologies work better for us as humans instead of entrap us, and I like that. But ultimately, whatever the technology brings, our role as parents has to be one of an ally. Because when you
Hmm.
position yourself as an adversary to your child in this world, they're not going to stop doing it, but they're not going to come to you when they need help, when they need guidance. And as a parent, I know personally, I would much rather have my child come to me when something goes wrong than try to figure it out themselves or turn to a friend who's clueless. And so I always advise parents, you know what? Get curious. Get curious, sit and talk, listen to your children, ask them questions, and try. And it can be hard, but try not to just belittle their time online, because this is
Mm.
the world that they were born into and did not ask for. And we need to be there to be an ally and to mentor them as well. In my mind, the best skills that you can give a child today are an ability to tap into their body and be mindful of how their body is reacting. So, our bodies will often send us signals that something is uncomfortable or something is not okay, or what we call a gut feeling about something, before
Mm.
our mind makes sense of it. And to be safe online and to be smart online and to discern what's really going on, you need to be able to take a moment and gauge how you're feeling about it. A lot of our time online is almost like an out of body experience, right? It's like you get onto a game, you get into your social media app, and then you look up and a half an hour has passed. And where have you even been? You certainly haven't been in
Mm.
your body. You don't even know what position you're in. You're upside down. You haven't taken a breath in 10 minutes. So to be able to get back into your body so that your body can send you the signals that you need of you need a break, or that's disturbing you, or this is making you anxious. Listening to your body is a great resource. And then the other thing is to teach kids how to be media literate, meaning
Mm-hmm,
to
mm-hmm.
really teach children the skills they need to interpret the media that they're interacting with. Where did this come from? Who made it? Am I being manipulated? Why does this notification keep popping up? What does that mean? All of these questions. In our world today, you need to be media literate or else you get consumed.
And so really we're talking about, well, one, ensuring that our children keep on asking the right questions, but also hanging on to that lost art of intuition. I think it's something we really don't talk about enough in this age of technology, and it would be really fantastic to encourage more children to really foster that sixth sense. Julia, thank you so much for joining us today on Freedom Matters. It's been really helpful, really practical, and I think you've been very useful for a number of our parents out there who are struggling, perhaps at the moment, to maintain technology boundaries in their household. Thank you so much for joining us today.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us on Freedom Matters. If you like what you hear, then subscribe on your favourite platform. And until next time, we wish you happy, healthy, and productive days.